Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of your favorite infotainment segment, Sly and Snide Tour Guide. In today's episode, we will explore Aruba's indigenous heritage, primarily represented by the Caquetio. We'll gather insights on how they lived and sustained themselves, their beliefs and origins. Not necessarily in that order, just so you know. So, onward we go. Follow the magic stick. Back when yours truly was in elementary school, I got my first history class in 3rd grade. I was introduced then to the peaceful Arawak and the war-mongering Carib tribes, and that was the extent of history provided on the subject. Flash forward through many autodidactic historical discoveries, and I am now confronted with the question, what is the difference between Arawak and Caquetio? As always, the tour guide went on an extensive search and wound up at the source, National Archaeological Museum of Aruba, where we had a chance to get our answer from the horse's mouth.
Well, as you know, science is very dynamic, so it changes continuously, and we also have to understand that when, at the moment, at certain times, documents are written, it is the perception of that moment and of a certain person or nation. And what happened is that Arawak has been seen as the Pacific people when the Spanish encountered the indigenous population in the Caribbean, and they said the crabs are the ones that are really the bad guys.
The Caribs, yeah.
Yes, but the real thing is that Arawak is a language. And Arawak language, it began to diverge, or began to develop around 5,000 before Christ in the middle Amazon. And through time, groups were migrating and there was fission and fusion, so groups were coming together and going apart. And through this time, they developed different cultures and different languages, but all can be traced back to 5,000 years before Christ at the Proto-Equatorial language. But Caquetio is an Arawakan language. Guajira is also an Arawakan language. Taino is also an Arawakan language. So we talk about different ethnicities, different cultures, talking a common language, which can be traced back 5,000 years ago when it began emerging and groups were migrating and developing new cultures and new languages. But the thing is that these are different peoples. They are not just one people. So that's the misconception that was for a long time. We have been educated with that we only had Caribs and Arawaks. They were really a nation that lived more than 500 years on the island, and they left the traces everywhere behind. But basically they were developed, they were indigenous peoples. They talked a Caquetio language. They were people that were around 160, 165 meters of length. They lived in villages, they had agriculture. Their origins are from the mainland, from Venezuela. They spoke an Arawakan language called Caquetio, and they called themselves people or living beings. And they had a few villages on the island. Until now we have 5 villages: Tanquiflip, Tanquilander, Santa Cruz, Parquidabos, and Savaneta. But there are indications that Oranjestad was also one of the sixth village. And around it, a network of satellite sites where they had agriculture, where they collected fruit, where they fished and collected shellfish. And they had religious beliefs strongly tied to the moon, to the sun, to the bats. And they were really aware of, let's say, nature and the synergy and symbiosis we have to have on this planet, that we have to live with the planet and not just use the planet and live on it.
Aruba is 20 miles long and approximately 6 miles wide at its widest point. The island's landmass is between, I think, around 72 square miles, of which 18% of the landmass comprises of the National Arawak Park. Within the National Park area, we can find today's points of interest and highlight the story on Caquetio.
Welcome to Parque Nacional Arawak, which is one of the protected areas under the management of Aruba Conservation Foundation. Aruba Conservation Foundation organization is the appointed organization to protect, preserve, and restore protected nature areas on the island, both terrestrial and marine. We manage 25% of the island's natural terrain and 0.2% of the island's territorial waters. And today you are in Parque Nacional Arawak, which is the largest protected area, which makes up 18% out of the 25% that is protected. So our role as an organization really is to protect nature. Nature is very diverse, very unique on the island. We have an incredible biodiversity, incredible ecosystems, and we are here, and together with so many other nature organizations on the island, we work to protect the place that we call home.
Our journey through the story of the living being takes us to the caves of Fontaine, where we can witness some of the pictographs of the Caquetio.
Basically, the relationship between the cave and the Caquetios is that with the Caquetios, the caves had a special religious importance. It's over here in the cave of Fontaine and a couple of other caves on the island. It's where these Caquetios came and had the religious ceremonies. This is basically where the shaman would come, do whatever ceremony they would do at that time, and started making these drawings in here. Basically, the drawings, most of the drawings that we have in here are related with the shaman. That is the relationship. The Caquetios never lived inside this cave. There was never ever any proof found that they lived inside the cave, but that this cave religiously was very important for them. The caves on the island is where we have a type of bat that lives in these caves. They belong to the long-tongued fruit bat family. And these bats are very important to our nature. The reason is most of the cactuses that we have on the island, they flower at night. The only animal who pollinate these flowers are these long-tongued fruit bats. And basically in the caves is where we have some of the largest breeding areas, breeding colonies of these bats. So it's very important, because if these bats disappear out of our ecosystem, a lot of the cactuses will disappear with them also. And also we have insect-eating bats inside these caves. That's also important because that helps to keep the population of insects, of mosquitoes, in check. And that's also why these caves are so important for nature conservation.
Ladies and gentlemen, Aruba is well known for its white sandy beaches, so much so that it's in the top 5 most beautiful beaches in the world. But do you know what the composition of our beach sand is? What makes Aruba's beach sand so special?
The Aruba beach sand, basically it's a process that's been taking millions of years. Aruba, basically large part of Aruba are coral reefs, limestone formations. And basically what happens is the parrotfish eats the coral to get to the polyps, and when they poop out the limestone, the coral. That's what makes it. But also you have the process that when coral dies and you have them that the ocean throws them on the beach, also the wave action grinds that coral and makes the sand so beautiful, so white, like we have it on the island.
Wow, talk about dropping some wisdom. That was an insightful dose of knowledge. Now that you've added another wrinkle to your brain, yours truly obviously doesn't need to remind you that the only way our beaches can stay pristine is if you and I can keep it clean. Food for thought. Beautiful people, welcome to the natural pool, but we affectionately call it Conchi. According to an oral recollection, the pool was used as a breeding den for turtles. But before I get ahead of myself, I'll let the experts take the lead on this one.
El nombre original ta curado tortuga. Anto curado tortuga porta ela bini foi nan, passou por nantava ta pensa, nos grande nanta pensa que nantava ta mene chasing e tortuga nan, passou den area tin tortuga, no muito love Conchi ainda não mira tortuga. Ja, anto porta tempo nem nantava ta chase nan, anto pone laga nan drente den, anto ta bira fácil desfez para nan pouco isso nanta vai comer. Pode compreender? E não tá nice para vista, tipo, não tá outra comer, pero não saco, esse tá outra onde comida na avó, não está proteana, com love, pero antes, então, nos grandes na antepassado também passa por tá bem, mesmo trajetória, né? Então, pensei o nome que é lugar que dá que nome curado de Tortuga.
Pause. Since we're talking about turtles, recent studies have pointed out that human interaction with turtles may lead to stress and illnesses for our friends in a half-shell.
This is not my idea of a good time.
So please, be mindful when you see these creatures, keep a safe distance, don't use flash photography or artificial light if you're filming or making a picture, and respect their habitat.
Essa aqui, bota mira, é casca tortuga, pero não sabe baje. Pero un cosa no sata que a tortuga não tem certa importância na cultura de Caquetio não. Ok? Mita suponuara, mita suposição, ok? Então a suposição tá que o tempo na já a população de tortuga não que tu põe huevo na Aruba. Tao mais grande que o que está aqui. Então, o tempo já por aí é leatherback nem que por tao pisa 200, 300 kg. Não gara não tá comendo para basta dia para não e na família não. Pero também o huevo não também tao source de proteína para não também de bajele. Então, me quer que a tortuga e nanang tá comendo e tao tem relevância e importância den cultura de Caquetios não que não usa den alguma pintura e figura que porta e casca de tortuga.
So the Caquetios were avid divers and sustained themselves on conch, the evidence of which can still be seen here and there on the island's coastline at Arashi, for example. These mounds of conch shells are from the ceramic era, 1000 to 1500 AD. They are a reminder of the heritage and lifestyle of the Caquetio. Just so you know, it's all protected heritage, according to the Convention of International Trade in Endangered Species, that is, meaning it is totally illegal to take any sea or conch shells as souvenirs. Apart from that, stealing shells disrupt the habitat of the creatures that thrive on the coast, such as the hermit crab. Not that you would ever partake in such endeavors because you are awesome, and if you have, well, enjoy the curse that goes along with it.
I put a spell on you.
The final stop on our tour is the Ayo Rock Formation, located, well, in Ayo. We had the chance to explore parts of the formation and go in-depth in the Caquetio's beliefs, rituals, as well as the birth of Aruba.
So Ayo is a very interesting place in Aruba. We have the formation, which is a batholith formation, which is a very old part of the island, but is a very interesting part of the island because now you see these rocks, but before they were covered with sand. And the sand eroded away and the rocks remained. So in itself is a very interesting part of the landscape. 90 million years ago, Aruba originated in the Pacific, not here. Yeah, it was on a plate, it's called Farallon Plate, and it moved, subduct through geological processes. It moved. During that time, the South and North American continents were separated, and it moved towards here, and it settled here in front. So Aruba is not coming from here, it's coming from the Pacific. This type of rock formation for the people in the past, the indigenous people in the past, was very important. As I said, it's a place where they did their ceremonies, spiritual ceremonies. For them, there was a layer of, you could say this layer, there was a layer of the sky, and then it was the underworld. And for them, there were specific people in their community who would do these activities that would come to these places, and they would act as sources where they would get information that you couldn't get within this dimension.
Okay. They couldn't get in this dimension. But by any chance, did they use any, I would say, kind of conscious enhancing substances for this particular trip?
It's very well possible. For example, we know that, or if we look at Venezuela and the Falcón area, they make Cocuy, which is an alcoholic drink made from agave that we also find here. The people, especially the Caquetio, because we have two groups here. The first one were archaic. We call them archaic. They came around 3,000 years ago. And the second group came around 1,000 years ago, more or less. And there are the Caquetio from Paraguaná. So they would make Cocuy from agave. And we also find it here everywhere actually. And during specific times of the year, you would see Oiber would light up with flowers, and that's the agave. So they would process it and they would make Cocuy of it. It's like a drink around 50 to 80% proof, so it's very heavy.
Oh yeah, that's gonna have you seeing things.
Sure. Yeah, and they would use it for ceremonies, but also for festivities.
Yes.
So it's something that we find there, and probably they use it here also, and we find agave here. And a very interesting thing is that we've done research on the pictographs, on the paint, and we found a component in the paint, so a chemical component in the paint that is related to agave. They worship, for example, the moon, the sun. They also have like worship, for example, bats. So they have different types of, you could say, deities or
didn't they do anime?
Animism.
Animism, yeah. That was,
well, see here.
Naruto, sorry.
Yeah. No, so here's the thing. You have to understand that for them, everything was alive, you know. So we are kind of separated from that nowadays, the way we live, you know. But for them, they were connected within this natural system, and within this natural system, everything was alive. So everything had importance and had meaning and was alive, you know. So for them, it was not like, oh, this is just sand, this is just rock. No, everything had, like you could say, was alive. Had soul. Yeah.
By the way, if you were wondering, Caquetio translates to the living being, and according to the latest discoveries, they call this island Oruma, the companion. The voices of the living being echo through the companion. So stop, listen, embrace, and protect. Guys, that's it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed the tour. Links to our previous episodes, social media platforms, and website are in the description. And don't forget to subscribe to Jis Bahari YouTube and click the notification bell for more slide content. As always, once a guest, always a friend. This is your slide tour guide, Beach Llama. Follow the magic.